Hello, this is the This with Coffee podcast. I am your host, Max McAuliffe. I was just telling our guest I actually am following my own theme because we're filming in the morning for once. I have a black coffee with me. Today we have an amazing environmental climate activist who is the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, which is an amazing organization. I'm going to put their info in the caption or comments of this video as well. Robin Boardman, hello.
Yo, Max, good to be with you.
Yeah, how's your day going so far?
Very well, thanks. Very well. I've just resettled into the Netherlands.
Mm.
I've my partner is doing a master's here in nature and forestry conservation, and I decided to jump ship from my humble island of Great Britain and come settle here for a while. So I've been very pleased this week that I got my sticker in my passport. That means I can stay with her for another 6 months, which I'm very pleased about. So doing
Oh,
well.
nice. How is the going forward? I guess does the process of you staying there, does it look fairly easy? Is it complex?
You know what? It looks a lot easier than I was expecting. As a partner of someone who's studying in the Netherlands, you can stay while as long as they're studying, and you just have to prove that you've been in a committed relationship. So I wrote this kind of very formal declaration of love. You know, we've been together for 2 years, and here's our train tickets to prove it. See page 3, section C. It's quite a surreal thing to write, but if it means we get to stay together whilst being here, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. I come from a public policy background, so I'm a nerd when it
Mm.
comes to uh formatting things like that. I kind of
Hmm.
it's very again very nerdy, but I see it as you're taking something that's very right brain, like in terms of like a political topic that is extremely abstract and then turning it into something very formulaic and left brain. So it's
Hmm.
funny to see like turning a love letter into like a table of contents.
Right. Yeah, into a essay with a source list and a bibliography. It's not often how we think of love.
Yeah.
But the Dutch system, yeah, it works well. It's speedy. I've also since Brexit applied for visas in both Spain and Portugal, and I must say the Dutchies, they do the bureaucracy a lot better.
Yeah.
Online forms, you can stay in the country whilst you apply. Portugal, hell, I called up their foreign embassy one time to get my visa checked through, and I got half an hour of their classic fado music, this lovely like guitar and sort of wailing woman music, and then after half an hour, I just got the classic obrigado, and I hang up, and that was it. So compared to that smooth online form where I can just get a sticker in my passport and stay for 6 months whilst they process it, lush.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
was
very
just
privileged.
Yeah, we just had, I didn't watch it because it's an absolute joke, but we just had last night our first presidential debate with our new Democratic candidate against the Republican candidate. And the way that they were speaking about immigration, the written part that I read today, I was like, okay,
Outrageous.
I'm good.
Yeah, absolutely. I have watched clips. It was 2 a.m. that it happened here in Europe, so I obviously did not watch it live, but I watched some highlights this morning when I woke up. And I mean, it's hard to call them highlights. I think Trump mentioned at one stage that migrants eat people's pets
Yeah,
and outrageous, lies like that. The fact that guy's on a presidential candidate list with that kind of rhetoric is just insane to me. On the other side of the pond, you guys have got a whole different world going on. But thankfully, Harris looked a lot stronger than Biden, I must say.
yeah. I, long story short, I don't, a lot of people in the US feel extremely hopeless. So then they kind of
Mm,
cave towards the least worst
yeah,
ideology.
exactly.
Whereas, like, you could clearly see with when they were talking about Palestine that it was like, oh, you're the same candidate.
Hmm.
So it was like, okay, we're a pro. I mean, even though we are a quote unquote superpower, um, it is really sad to be one of the minority in the world that is pro. genocide, which is such a horrible thing to. I
I
mean,
know.
that's a weird word to say.
No,
Going
but it's true.
genocide.
It's very painful. You're so right. The fact that there's no clear differential between the two main candidates on that topic is heartbreaking. It's why I've been so encouraged to seeing Jill Stein from the Green
Hmm.
Party and Cornel West coming out as independents, coming out as other candidates who are really pushing on that point and saying we are the non-genocide party. I mean, it's crazy they have to even say that.
Yeah,
But that's the state of play right now.
yeah. Um, I have been reading a lot. Speaking of transition, sort of, because I like to be all over the place. I was reading a lot of also just the environmental destruction going on
Mm,
in Palestine, which has been occurring in the Middle East for U.S. cause and a lot of the European nation cause, but environmental destruction is part of the psychological breakdown of the people in the Middle East because of imperialism. But I would love to hear first, not to be too broad of a question, what had you enter the environmental climate space? Like, what drew you to be like, this is something I'm really
mm.
passionate about?
Yeah, it was quite a windy road, I gotta say. I grew up in Southeast London, suburbs, not much nature connection going on there. I wouldn't have called myself someone who particularly cared about the environment. I went to university, and in my first year, I'd already been part of a raving culture in my teenage years before university. So when it came to kind of the social bubble of drinking and partying, like I was there at the weekends, but I feel like I'd done it in many ways. So I started to branch out of the bubble a little bit, and I started volunteering, working in a few different retirement homes and art projects and drug policy reform. And towards the end of that first year, I became incredibly depressed because I realized that all of these individual actions I was taking as a volunteer were leading nowhere. And in fact, the groups that I was trying to help were struggling massively under austerity. And I didn't name it that at the time, but I could realize that something systemically was going wrong. And through that, I thought, okay, I'm going to actually not just sit here and be depressed. I'm going to go to the library. I've got this massive university library and look for books about social change. How do I make it happen? What's going on in the world? And through that, I found some brilliant writers, including one of yours, Noam Chomsky,
Hmm.
excellent author. And he helped me, along others, connect the dots between foreign policy and environmental degradation, war, colonialism. And it was from that kind of understanding. I'd been familiar with his work before because I studied languages and linguistics, but this was a real eye opener that made me think about what's my role to play in all this. And the one that I settled on was the biggest question, I think, for my future and for anyone of our age is like, what do we do with the climate catastrophe that's, impending and threatens to destroy life on this planet? And I became beginning to become slightly active in Southeast London over the summer. I went along to a group called Friends of the Earth, traditional kind of NGO, has been going for a long time. And I went along to a group, and there was me and about 6 or 7 people over the age of 60. And they produced a flyer for a film about bees. And I gotta say, I was dismayed. I was like head in hands afterwards because you know what? This flyer they printed out, they put this work into, you couldn't even read it. It was like black and white, blurry text. And I thought, fuck, these guys, my future is in these guys' hands. Like, what are we doing? So the depression was still there, but it was kind of transforming into this like anger, like, what's going on? How do I do something about this? And it was with that kind of charge that I started searching online. And I found a group called People and Planet. And they were hosting this student gathering in the north of England, and they were inviting people to come and camp with them and learn about the world and what's going on. And I thought, this looks cool. And I looked at the date and I was like, oh shit, it starts tomorrow.
Mm.
And so I called them real quick and I was like, hi guys, I'm from South London. I never camped in my life. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't have any money, whatnot, but I could buy a ticket. I could, throw some stuff together. Could you provide me a tent? Could I come stay? And they're like, sure, come on up. And so I went and I didn't even have a jumper. I just had a t-shirt and a pair of jeans and just went up to this event. And I met such a compassionate, cool group of people who were just dedicated on this path of social change that I was like, sign me up. And ever since, I've been really passionate about social justice issues.
Yeah, I love that, the intersectionality of it. Because I also come from a social justice background, and then
Hmm.
I entered recently I'm a little over 6 months with my current um, organization that I work for, and
Hmm.
it combines my role is I'm the New York State Advocacy Manager for Clean Air Initiative. So
Hmm.
basically, anything that touches air quality in New York State, I work on that, and it's combining or making clear that for its in its own right, obviously environmental climate issues are important, but making sure that the public health voice is there and pulling in medical professionals, pulling in healthcare providers, and being like, hey, this isn't this like uh, not to throw words around, like this bourgeoisie, like
Hmm.
isolated topic of like
Yeah.
once a year Earth Day, yay, and then like completely forget about it. This is
Totally. Yeah, and it's easily done. A lot of our lives we live separate in many ways to the natural space. And so, and those that have access to it are often more from that kind of bourgeois elite bubble where they can, drive off in their fancy cars to go for a nice trip around the parks. But the question of public health really brings it home. It's like, no, no, these are our kids who are
hmm
struggling in the inner city, who are getting asthma, like me,
hmm
growing up living next to busy roads. A beautiful girl in South London died. They've tracked now the cause of death to air pollution specifically. That's now what's on her death certificate. And that's going to be the same for hundreds of thousands of people across the world. In fact, they've estimated that air pollution is killing 6 million people, 6, 7, or even 8 million people across the world. That's the scale of the Holocaust every
yeah,
single year. It's devastating. But there's really a lot of solutions out there, cities that are starting to cut down on how many cars you can have in there, increasing green spaces. It's really possible. And it starts to break down those barriers between working people and green spaces because it's part of the solution. It's like we just need more of that in the city. We need to have safer roads for our kids. And it's so doable. I'd love to see more of it. I was wondering, how is New York doing with that? I know in London we've had this ultra clean air zone brought in. I think there was something similar happening for New York, right?
we so our politics, I'm sure, as you know, is very much in the binary right now. You're either red or blue, and we think of, unfortunately, like we think blue is like absolutely progressive, and that's just not the case. A Mississippi blue is not going to be same as a New York blue, is not going to be the
Hmm.
same as a California blue. And unfortunately, I think people see New York City as extremely progressive, and just New York State as a whole, we are very much a Biden blue. That's how,
Hmm.
and by that I mean center right blue.
Right.
And that's how the governor functions. Governor Hochul, she is very much a conservative Democrat, and
Mhm.
she maybe, putting it, being generous, maybe a centrist, but for example, she was, by law, she was supposed to enact congestion pricing to
Hmm.
and she just decided recently, nope, I'm not gonna enact it. I'm gonna try and form a new plan with the legislature. And everyone's like, well, we're gonna take you to court because
Hmm.
you were supposed to enact this. And she's being very just politically minded, being like, no, I'm not gonna do it. It's very authoritarian, is basically
Right.
it. And
Reds.
she's taking advantage of the current political climate and being like, well, we can push, and rightfully so, being like, oh, a lot of the people in power who are conservative, Republicans are being fascist and authoritarian, but the Democrats are kind of pushing that on them and being like, oh,
Hmm.
there's no way we can be that. That's their thing. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, you are literally doing the same exact thing. And
Yeah.
we had a
The
bunch of
party
solar.
machine.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a bunch of solar plans, uh, you know, that were going to move forward. Those were halted mainly because of like capitalistic greed on both sides of the New York State government and the private contractors.
No, man.
Um, we are, I don't know. I'm seeing more and more people are waking up and seeing this as a public health issue. And I think we're trying to motivate the legislators a little bit to not just see as like, oh, you view this bill in the environmental committee or the public health committee. And it's like, no,
Hmm.
these are both.
These are all one thing, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
but
A
no,
lot.
exactly like you said. I mean, a lot of especially kids are dying and being harmed from air pollution. I remember in June 2023 when the Canadian wildfires were happening.
Hmm.
A lot of kids in New York City. We have an area near or in the Bronx called Asthma Alley, and it's literally just low income and um, primarily black and brown neighborhoods where the kids, because of air pollution, were already struggling with severe asthma. So when the wildfires were happening, a lot of those kids were being sent to the ER.
Wow.
So it
Yeah.
just shows clearly the connection between environment and public health.
Totally. I saw those images, man, from last year. The kind of apocalyptic orange skies across New York. I mean, that's the world we're entering into rapidly, and to think that we when I say we, I mean the elite party machines, as you say, that are gearing this all in that direction. They're leading us into this total catastrophe, this apocalyptic looking world. And I feel like some kind of Cassandra figure that's calling out about, this is what's happening, this is what's coming. These doomsday-esque images are no longer the science fiction, or as I've heard now, cli-fi, climate fiction stories. They're the reality. Um, and how do we need to resist that. And I'd love to work more with people in the States on that. I think it's a really crucial piece of the puzzle, if not the leading one, is to have a revolution in the States that changes that, to
Yeah,
really pulls out the party machine and gets people in power who care about their health, who care about their environment, who care about their justice issues.
yeah. I remember I was walking outside with like a mask on, and I was like,
Mm.
okay, well, I'm protecting myself from COVID and wildfires. And I was like, this is
Right.
truly apocalyptic, like you were saying.
Totally. Yes, yes, it's the combination, right? And this is such a good point. The one of the reasons the COVID shock hit people so badly, like myself, is because we already had the underlying issues of air pollution, which was particularly hitting brown and black communities and lower income communities where people are, condensed together in busy street areas, and compiling social justice problems with a pandemic. It's just heartbreaking to see, and it will happen again. We know that viruses like COVID are going to spread more and more in the future as we continue to deforest, as we continue to wreck our natural habitats that are housing various species that can host these viruses. The more we destroy them, as we are at the crazy rates of football pitches every second destroying the Amazon, the more chance we have of facing these viruses. And to look at them holistically, as you're saying, to not just treat COVID as one issue, climate as the other, health as another. It's to say, no, 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 these are all linked. These are all about people and planet. And the more we can bring that, that oneness, in a spiritual way, I think the better.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the boldness of not just you, but also the approach that the organization Extinction Rebellion does. Can you describe a little bit how you became a co-founder of the organization?
Totally. So it follows on nicely from the story of my getting into environmental activism. So I went to that gathering in the north of England, People and Planet, and I went along to a series of workshops, lots of nice young people hanging out, teaching each other of what their rights were, if they were being arrested or at a protest, speakers from Pakistan telling us about climate justice. And we were having dinner at one point, and some kind of older white dude comes up and he starts to interrupt everyone and goes, excuse me, I also want to do a workshop. I know everyone's having dinner, but if you finish early, just come to this tent and hang out, and I'll talk to you about how I got my university to divest from fossil fuels by doing a hunger strike. I was like, hmm, kind of like, ignoring him for my food for the first half of his speech. But then when he said that last line, I was like, sounds interesting. So I, yammed it down, got over to the tent, and this guy was Roger Hallam, and he's one of the other co-founders of Extinction Rebellion. And he told this very powerful story about how to challenge neoliberal institutions to focus on their reputation. They are saying in the liberal kind of way, oh, we're progressive university. We focus on climate issues, on social justice. Look, we've got a whole climate department. We've got all these teachers. And at the same time, in their classic hypocrisy, they were putting millions into fossil fuels. And the way Roger designed, and he'd been working on different social campaigns in London for a few years, the way he designed to target that was to do a series of direct action, was to go beyond the boardrooms, the board meetings, and say, this isn't working, this is urgent, we're going to spray paint the university, we're going to blockade its entrances, we're going to go on hunger strike even, to prove our point. And within 8 weeks of that campaign launching, the university flipped. It was a campaign that was direct, it was confrontational, but it did it with an approach of kind of tough love. It's like, the chancellor of the university, he's not a bad guy necessarily. He's in a bad system and he's acting along that system. And we were there to be like, we respectfully disagree with you and we think things should change. And we've got a lot of people who are on our side. In fact, they helped Roger out with that campaign by emailing the whole student mailing list to say, look, this campaign is wrong, and you shouldn't pay attention to them. But they named them, and they even, anyone could then Google them afterwards. And guess what? 5% of everyone they emailed really did agree with them, got involved with the direct action campaign. Within a few weeks later, they totally changed their whole tune. They divested. And this is really how quick social change can happen. And I liked that presentation from Roger because of that speed, which I feel is so necessary in what we're facing. This is no longer a time of petitions and marches, and it's a time of direct action. And this is what Roger really showed me. And so I stayed in touch with him. We kind of dabbled with a few campaigns. And then by the end of my second year at university, I was doing languages. Like I said, I was Spanish, Portuguese, and I was planning on spending my year abroad to support some of the countries most affected by climate breakdown, Mozambique and Nicaragua. And right at the last moment, I had my plane tickets booked and everything. I pulled out. I said, no, actually, I can't do this. I can't be that white savior guy that goes over to these countries and says, here's how, I can help out. I need to try and change things right here at home. And with working with Roger, I really felt like I saw the path forward, the kind of the codes of social change, as Gail, another one of our co-founders, called it. In fact, I basically copied his design for getting King's College to divest at my own university in Bristol. And Kel Surprise, guess what? Within the year, full divestment. We occupied their offices. We really made the point clear that we're not going to go away. And they even go further. These institutions, again, they love to go on their reputations. They don't just say, oh, we've changed our mind, good point or whatever, we'll divest. They go, we're absolutely going to divest everything, and we're going to be the first university in the
Hmm.
country to do it because we're the leaders now. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, suddenly they're the leaders. Of course, they don't do it. It's just, fancy words. But it's interesting to see how much they rely on this idea of reputation. So with Roger, with these campaigns, and dropping out of university, that was my spark to become one of the co-founders.
Isn't it so interesting playing with, like forcing these institutions, disrupting the system to make the change, but also playing with their egos to be like,
Mm,
clearly you're not going to do it for the right reasons. So here's some other benefits that will feed your superficial needs
exactly.
that,
Exactly.
like, sure, you want to claim that you're going to be leading this, like, why not? We know that's false, but if you're going to fully divest and make sure that those plans are solidified, then do whatever marketing you feel like you need to
Right.
do.
It's the deed that we care about, right? And so if they want to, however they want to frame it, it's fine. And this is what I really learned through the campaigning was this, how important strategy was, how important the messaging was. Who is this chancellor? What do they care about? What are their, feelings around this? Who's their close circle in the university? What's the angle that's going to really appeal to them? Is it this kind of university pride? Is it something to do with local ecosystems? What is their tipping point? And this is how I've also since then approached people from across the political spectrum, is to go, what's happening to the destruction of our natural life systems, our air, our water, our plants, even the food we eat, all of it is a physical process. It's not a political idea. It's these things are happening. The earth is physically heating up with greenhouse gases and increased temperatures. So there's ways of approaching how the consequences of that impact different groups of people and different ways to frame the message to appeal to them. So for example, many conservatives with a small c rather than the political party in the
Mhm.
UK, they also have a lot of patriotism, a lot of pride for the natural landscapes of the UK,
Right.
the green and pleasant lands. And so when the kind of agenda becomes we need to grow, we need to expand our airports, we need to push cities out, you actually find a lot of conservatives that are going, no, 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 we need to protect our green spaces. And so we worked on this around in the Bristol area, was to say we didn't want an airport expansion. And we even got a Conservative MP on board, not because he cared about the emissions in the same way that we were concerned about it, but because he was concerned on this green space angle. And so suddenly you have these unlikely alliances. And, whilst I really strongly believe in uniting what fragmented parts of the left we have, I also believe in not, uniting across the political spectrum, because this is an emergency. It's a life or death situation as we face the next few decades. And in emergencies, we need to have unlikely coalitions in the same way that in the World War II, you had the conservative Catholic Church allying with the communists against Hitler. You
Mhm.
know, super unlikely at any other moment in political history. But given the extent of how worrying fascism was, given the mass death project that was going on, those alliances are needed. And I think the same is true for right now.
Yeah. I think it's a solid point to, because at least with my work, we've noticed that a lot of legislators who um, in the past really didn't want to touch environmental issues because they saw they're more centrist and they saw it as only this like progressive topic, and they didn't want to be associated with anything progressive because of their district or whatever, which, as you just said, is untrue because we pull in a wide range of people into our coalition regardless of ideology. But a lot of those legislators had family members who are uh, a combination of physically and intellectually disabled,
Mm,
and being like, obviously in other words, basically telling them, if you think your child, if you think your cousin, whoever is going to be immune from this environmental destruction just because they're the family member of a legislator and benefit from that, you are absolutely wrong. If they don't have asthma already, they're gonna get it, if not lung cancer.
Mhm.
So, a lot of them woke up, but there was also, some cases where with legislators who, were talking about their experiences of like they walk through a particular garden in their district uh, every Sunday or something like that, and just telling them like, well, eventually that's not going to occur anymore. Your little tradition that you have with your family, but also if in your district you are, a lot of people like that you are continuing to bring like, let's say, conservation funding into that park or whatever, you're not going to be able to politically benefit from that anymore because it's not going to exist. So unfortunately, again, it goes back to like, well, if morals aren't going to persuade you, here's other
Exactly.
superficial reasons.
Things that affect your own circumstances. And I think as wildfires, floods, all these natural disasters, as they increase in intensity across the world, the more and more people that are being directly affected by it and are waking up to that direct need. I mean, one of our big funders early on in Extinction Rebellion was a Californian guy who had lost his home
Mhm.
in a wildfire, millionaire, lost his home, but this just totally opened his eyes and opened his pockets also to just really donate to support causes that are doing something about it. And I think you make a good point in the sense that across the political spectrum, we're all affected by it. It doesn't matter who you are, because one of the things that's so powerful and yet it's still hard to understand about the climate crisis and the ecological breakdown is that it's universal. It really affects every single person across the world in some form or another, whether that be through what we've discussed, air pollution, or whether that's a natural disaster, or whether that's, the crop yield of your local farm, decreasing because of freak weather patterns. It really affects everyone. So it's firstly universal, but it's also exponential. It's not getting worse slowly, it's getting worse rapidly. We're already looking at a year, last year, over 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're looking at over 2 degrees global warming above the industrial baseline within the next decade, 15 years. That means massive parts of the world are going to be uninhabitable. Where are those people going to go? They're going to have to find new homes. They're going to have to find new food sources. It's rapidly getting worse to the point where it looks like by the end of this century, if we don't throw everything we've got at this, we'll be looking at a 4-degree world of, rapidly collapsing tipping points. The Arctic, the Amazon, the list is painfully long. So it's affecting everyone. It's getting rapidly worse. And this is the kicker, it's existential. It has the possibility to literally wipe out life in the sense that it has the possibility to, kill people on a mass scale to the point where there was a paper that came out a few years ago by William Ripple, who put forward that 3 to 6 billion people will be affected by this level of warming by the end of the century. That's a massive part of the human population, and that's on average. This could be worse or it could be better, but these are the kind of figures we're looking at. So, universal, exponential, existential. These are the key qualities I think that really bring home the urgency to me, that keep me motivated on a daily basis to really think about that scale and the opportunities that crisis also brings for collaboration.
Yeah. So we've talked about clearly environmental destruction is, murdering animals, murdering human animals. It's affecting water quality. It is, it's ultimately continuing to affect food supply, all of these, life or death issues. However, a lot of people, especially in the US, because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer,
Mhm.
when they go to engage with politics, they're like, well, how is this going to benefit me, support me on an economic level. And obviously, we have a lot of working class people who are also seeing, this, I think we should be prioritizing this as a public health issue and, or environmental issue for its own sake. How would you, whether it's with Extinction Rebellion or just in general as an individual activist, how do you explain this on, again, making clear this isn't just an issue for the powerful and the elite to
Mm-hmm.
exploit? How is this a working class issue? How is this an economic issue? Um, how is this an issue that is intrinsically tied to like the poor people's campaign?
Totally. Well, I think one of the things that I've really found over these last few years is the beauty of being in community. It's one of the things that I think has been so lost over the last 30, 40 years of a heavily corrupt and unequal system, as you mentioned, is that one of the ways it's controlling us is by dividing and conquering, by atomizing people, saying you've got to work harder, spend less time doing your social activities, you know, more isolated, more atomized. And the more atomized we are, the less power we have. And so one of the things that I've found that applies across the social spectrum for change is that once we're in community, once we're talking to each other, once we're thinking about, oh, what could we do together? We're starting to kind of create what has historically been a very powerful thing for humanity since its birth is mutual aid, is supporting each other in small groups. And I think quite quickly, once you have those support bubbles, you start to be able to challenge the injustices in our life. Where are the rich and powerful seizing our means of living well, and how can we fight back against that? And what I've seen in community is really quite a powerful transition from how those conversations can start with oh, how are we going to deal with the waste problem on our street, or what's happening with housing prices in our area, can very quickly escalate up to, you know, this economic system is destroying us. We need to totally change it. And these aren't, they become just through the act of speaking, through getting a real chance, which is sadly radical in our society, to actually get a chance to have a say on your life. We get told this idea that we're in democracy. There's no fucking way we're in democracies. You put a X in a box every 5 years. That's not democracy. That's not having your say. It's, getting to pick a person who might represent you or best likely won't. So this getting together in community, having a chance to have a say about what you care about, quickly pushes people towards a more radical solution, and I think is the foundation, is the bedrock for any social change project. And from there, totally connecting into environmental, local issues, they're all one and the same in my mind.
Yeah. Now I have a really stupid question.
Go ahead,
You
please. I've
you
been too
used
serious. You call me
no,
out.
no. Oh my God. This is I was gonna tell you, this has been one of the best conversations I've had in a
Oh,
while. I
thank
think
you.
this is extremely important, and approaching it from the systemic level is, you know, I think people misinterpret like, oh, well, you need to bring in the micro lived experiences. And it's like, well, no, that's exactly what approaching something from a systemic macro level is. You're combining all of these lived experiences together and seeing it as, this, we're not just fish that happen to live in the same space. We are the
Hmm.
fish bowl,
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
Um, you used to have short hair. What made you now have this fabulous long hair?
Excellent. So the pandemic came and I was at
There it
home
is. That
for
makes
a
sense.
long time. And suddenly I went I went to a private all boys school in South London, and where we had very particular rules about hair length. Not too short, not too long, can't touch a collar, got to be over a two length, these kind of ridiculous. regulations. So, a few years afterwards, pandemic hits. Suddenly, I'm not going to the barbers. Suddenly, I'm not looking in the mirror as much. I'm thinking, huh, I'll just leave it. And here we are 4 years later with locks that I had no idea that I could grow. I've been through the whole hair phase. I've had a mustache, I've had a full beard and mustache, I've had, just experiment, whatever, early 20s, right? Throw out a few different looks. Don't know what sticks, but I like to play around with it.
Yeah, I did the exact opposite. I started balding at an early age, and I didn't have like your length hair, but I did have, a full head of hair. But I just realized every morning I it became very it was a combination of like psychological and sociological for me, where I was trying to fit these standards of like how my hair should look and blah blah blah, and just like balding more and just consistently like moving my hair around to like cover up just reality. So I was just like,
Mm,
you know what? Like right now it's actually a little grown out. Normally I
hmm
have my hair completely shaved, but I was like, I'm just gonna own it. I don't care if, you know, it makes me less conventionally attractive. I was like, I'm not gonna pretend like I'm not balding. So I literally just went to the barber and I was like, shave it off. And he was like,
Shave it
you
off.
is like, you sure? And I was like, yeah. And I loved it. It's been the best decision. I did it in 2022 and I'm just like,
It's also liberating, right?
yeah,
I've also done it to myself in the past. I got kicked out for a week from school for that. Wasn't following those regulations, but it felt damn good to have
yeah.
that fresh head of hair. And I think you're rocking it, man. I think
Oh,
you're really
thank you.
rocking
Thank you.
it.
I have a massive receding hairline. I forgot genetically what it is. I think it's your mother's. I don't know if this is true or not. Your mother's father is what
hmm
your hairline is. And that
Ah.
is absolutely true in my case. One small on the top and then a massive receding hairline. I was like, whatever. But
Thanks, Granddad.
yeah, exactly. Robin, thank you so much for having this discussion. I would love to collaborate on something in the future. This is, really important work. Where can people find you? Is there anything coming up that you want to share, or, just your socials?
Thanks, man. Yeah, robinboardman.com, just the name, nothing fancy. And same for all the social media, just my name. It's one thing that is coming up that I'm really excited about this weekend, which is, as time of recording, going to be September 14th. I am going to block a motorway in the Netherlands. It's called the A12, and it's to demand that the Dutch government stops their outrageous 44 billion euro fossil fuel subsidies. And we just got news that the police have decided to go on strike on that day and not police that protest. They also are striking for their future, for their pension, and they have picked that day in particular in a sort of, they won't say this openly, of course, but it's obviously a solidarity move. And this is powerful. This is where protests can lead us. And I really encourage people to take to the streets, to own that power, get in touch with me, and we can organize something big together like this moment. And I hope next time we speak to each other, which I hope will be in the not too distant future, that I can say that we've kicked fossil fuel subsidies out of the Netherlands.
Yeah. Oh my God, that like sent shivers down my spine. I could never imagine US police doing anything good on any topic. So, wow, that is really awesome. For this podcast, you can find everything at bio.site/ this with coffee. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter at this with coffee. And if you have any questions for me or for Robin, you can message us or message me at thiswithcoffeepod@gmail.com. Robin, thank you so much again for being on.
Thanks, Max. Total pleasure.